If you want the whole story of how I chose to build this particular combination, it's all in the description panel, but let's dive right in. 3 things I noticed right away about the Corvair body. Seems to be really good quality, comes trimmed and quite well trimmed, but it's awfully narrow and not very high in the roofline. And those fender cutouts were pretty small, meaning that it could be a challenge running big tires with this body. Also, there wasn't any room at all between those shock towers and the inside of the hood. So I came up with a simple plan to drill holes into the front shock towers and insert short bits of parts tree or sprue to be my posts. All I had to do was bore wee holes for the clips. And although I consider the sight of body clips on the hood comfort food, on the roof I don't feel the same way. So I engineered a new trick to mount the body down low at the back, just like on my Land Cruiser, only better. Better because the rear pins don't have to come out. All you got to do to access the electronics is remove the front 2 clips and the body hinges back on those 2 pins. Speaking of electronics, since I was able to keep the boat sides for this build, I zip tied a Hobbywing 1080 to the left side. And right behind it I glued down the switch with shoe goo, which I use a lot. By the way, that pointer is a facsimile of my real hand, traced and cut out from foam. I shoe gooed the receiver nice and high on the battery tray. I used to buy expensive silicone conformal coating, but I find this thick black latex paint works just as well at a fraction of the price. Now let's look at that mechanism I made that allows the body to hinge back like it does. That's a carbon fiber rod with stubby plastic pin mounts on either end, superglued together with a rubber hose connector. I avoided screwing the rod down or using zip ties to let the flexibility of shoe goo do its job, or let go in the event of a bad crash. The rubber tubing provides shock absorption too. Let's look at some of the suspension mods I made to mitigate the problem of the tire rubbing against the body. I stiffened up the suspension front and back by trashing the stock mushy 70mm springs and going with some stiff 60mm axial springs, which I conveniently had on hand. They actually fit tighter over the shock bodies and are therefore better. All you need are bottom keepers that fit the diameter of the spring, and you just turn the top keeper upside down. It works great. Meanwhile, up front, I never liked the way Redcat attached the drag link to a weird and wobbly point an inch down from the control arm on the tie rod itself. I got rid of all that stuff in favor of axial SEX-10-2 parts. The rod was short, so I made a couple of spacers out of worn-out ball ends from my junk inventory. And I bent the new tie rod in the middle so that it would clear the pumpkin a little bit better and provide more steering left and right. I made a whole new drag link out of some fresh rod ends and a fine thread bolt with a head cut off. And I screwed it to the steering arm where it should have been in the first place, and is incidentally on newer Redcat trucks like the Ascent. The coup de grace was flipping the servo horn so that it's facing back instead of forward. The stock position makes it very vulnerable to be hit by every rock that comes along. Okay, time to talk about paint. For that period correct look, I went with Proline's Heritage Blue, which I would back up with a tan mix of 2 colors I concocted for an earlier build. The disadvantage of fall weather and cooler temperatures is that it's too cold and windy to airbrush outside, so I did all my airbrushing in the garage. The good news is the furnace is blowing hot air and nothing beats a good floor vent for baking paint between coats. I did 7 or 8 light coats, including that inner coat of the tan color, which turned out really well. Window masks can be quite a problem, especially for new modelers, and the ones supplied with the Corvair were okay. It always amazes me in this age of computers and laser cutters when everything doesn't fit perfectly, but I've seen worse. The masks are paper instead of vinyl, which can sometimes be difficult to wrap onto curved surfaces, but the Corvair windows are mostly flat, and the paper mask stuck very well, so I had no problem with paint getting under the seams. Here's where I made a mistake. To position the rear body pin holes accurately, I used cardboard and a marker to make a template so I could duplicate the exact position side to side. Oops, I got marker on the inside of the body, which I thought was on the outside, and so I painted over it, making it permanent. No big deal as it turned out, because I've been thinking about making those fenders black all along. I've got nothing but praise for the decal set. They were beautifully printed, precisely die cut. They went on just perfect, and they look great. Now, the Chevy Corvair was famously rear engine, so it had no grille up front like a Tesla we have today. But this decal set came with a front grille, and to be honest, it just looked a lot better, so I went with that one.
That looks really good.
And to be fair, there have been Corvair mods where an engine was put up front, so we can just say that this is one of those. Back in the 60s, the actual Corvair had chrome around the windshield and around the rear window too. But I decided that on my build, black would look better, so I got out some electrical tape and my X-Acto knife and started cutting some thin strips. For the side windows, which you'll see later, I went with my old standby, which involves carefully running a black Sharpie around each window. If you want to try this yourself, always start with a fresh marker right out of the pack. You'll be glad you did. Also, if you make a mistake or slip, the ink comes off with rubbing alcohol if you act fast. And you can try again. Mistake or not getting the marker on that fender, I wasn't sure whether to leave the fenders blue or make them black after all. So while I had the tape out, I made up some black fender covers. Also, I didn't want to waste hours taping and painting if during my field test it was obvious that, sadly, the fenders rubbed like hell and had to be cut off, which was a real possibility. Yep, definitely gonna go with the black fenders. Mosquito Creek Ski Club is a name given to a nearby tiny truck section where short, steep paths snake up and down along a steep slope through the trees, the way pistes do at the ski clubs north of Toronto. I already had the artwork done up from years ago, it just needed a slight refresh. And I thought of a cute way to combine my own artwork with the sticker sheet that came from JConcepts. For my inkjet decals, I buy vinyl sheets from Amazon and seal them with an acrylic spray that makes them last a long time, even outside in harsh conditions. I also have an extensive sticker collection going back to the 1970s that I use for all my builds. I even had some ski-related stuff. And of course, lots of stickers related to the RC hobby. None of my builds would be truly complete without a custom license plate and an OTT, Ontario Tiny Trucks sticker in the back window. You'll notice that there's no rear bumper on this build, but I knew I would need something to protect that sharp edge of Lexan that tends to get whacked when you drop off a sharp ledge. The challenge would be coming up with a bumper that doesn't get in the way when you lift the body shell back. It took me a while to figure it out, but eventually I came up with something that I think is pretty good. Every 4x4 needs a winch, and I've been using these ones that I get off Amazon. They're cheap plastic fakes, but if you put decals on them, they look pretty decent. Mega Jerk is just a off-road company that I made up for fun. Once again with the shoe goo. Shoe goo is fine for a winch like this because the winch itself doesn't have to do any pulling. In the future, I will replace the fake hook on the front with a real functioning hook, and it will be at the end of a line that will feed through the winch under the grill to a spring-loaded retractor. Time to clean up a little bit and get out the paints again. By the way, those fenders look good. And that's not even black paint. That's just Sharpie marker over and over again. One last check with the caliper to see that the winch is perfectly centered. And here's the finished product. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and feel free to leave a comment in the section below. So far, I've been able to respond to 100% of all comments left on my channel.